Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Now, for today's video will be a war room video, and today's war room will have an announcement at the end about where this channel is going. Obviously, I haven't asked for the regular. Please leave a like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. If you aren't already subscribed, that is obviously the way that it goes. But yes, there is also something I missed in the start of this video. So today's war room will be covering the DP Genesis War. Now, the DP Genesis War has been going on for a very long time, and there are several reasons on both sides that have caused this war to continue for as long as it is going. So number one, DP were using a lot of botting systems to make high income, ensuring that they were capable of keeping up with the war. DP did not actually have a larger player base than Genesis. They just had a higher resource fund, so they were using higher power ships in their battles with Genesis. The problem for them was when they formed up fleets with bots, the bots would form automated strategic pattern, and they would have to then follow with the automated strategic pattern, which is very easy to guess. It's like fighting against AI. So that is how come Genesis really got the edge on them and why they kept beating them back so quickly. Now, besides this year, Genesis were aided by several other corps, and this caused a lot of DP to fall in. Now, another problem for DP was they were throwing their corps on the outside to protect their bots. Now, that was to ensure that they made income, while the other corps would just serve as a shield and a warning for them to switch off their bots for a little while during that war period. Now, obviously, this wasn't very on, and it caused several of the corps within DP to jump ship and jump into Genesis, helping Genesis attack them, telling them where their strong points were for wealth, where some of their stations were located, and all of this played majorly against DP. Now, the war is still ongoing, and with everything that was said about DP, obviously you might be thinking they're botting so heavy that they're still doing this. Well, the devs did take action against them. They banned plenty of accounts, and they are still banning accounts of theirs. Now, after they took heavy losses in nullsec, they moved their mining operations down to highsec, where their ships couldn't be destroyed. And this allowed DP to run their botting farms a lot more safely, and even though the income was a lot lower, they still did a lot of income. Considering the number of bots that could run and the amount of chances of you losing a ship, they were actually making a greater income in highsec. So they kept their bots running in highsec, and as we reach this period, all of a sudden things just start rushing out of proportion, and things just start climbing up at a rapid rate. Now, this is where things go a bit crazy, because at this point Genesis started to have problems within their own corporation. Within Genesis Corporation, a lot of people were working from home. So while they were working from home, they were doing side operations like mining while they were at work. So obviously, work from home, you just switch on your device, you leave it there to mine, you don't have to be on it 24/7, and you can do your work on your computer. So you're doing your work and you're mining in private on the side. Now, in order to make sure that they could mine safely, they would join into the team comms, and they would sit together with a bunch of people who were also working. So basically, it was a very conducive environment. It was a small little distraction once every few minutes that they had to get to their stuff and dock it up, unload, and jump to the next belt with the rest of the team. Now, a lot of the fleet commanders didn't like the fact that they were on the game and not participating. Now, obviously, they were only on the game because they had the opportunity to run offline. Now, when they started to see this, they started to do a lot of mean things in terms of what Genesis was doing. So Genesis started to some corps within Genesis started to up their tax rate to 100% during any CTA. Now, this year definitely hurt the population of Genesis. It made them not want to play. Now, some players aren't PvP players. They knew that they had a lot of players who don't play PvP at all. So this year impacted those players, and those players had a negative reaction. So that's how come some of them quit the game. They didn't leave the corp generally, and some of them jumped to different corps within Genesis who didn't implement the rule. So this is one of the things that happened. Another thing that happened was some of the fleet commanders got extremely pushy. Obviously, we do know of one of the most extremely pushy corp commanders from Genesis. Everybody knows him. But regardless from him, other corps commanders started to get very pushy. They jumped into your chats while you were at work and they demanded that you join in the CTA right now. Now, this is where things started to take a negative push. A lot of people started to hate the way things were being operated. Now, beyond this, there were other things that came into play. You understand that this is a mobile game, so you obviously can't dedicate 6 hours every single day to the game non-stop. So when they ran CTAs, they generally start the CTA 3 hours before a station was put into reinforcement. And this was so that they could go in, attack, clean up the sector, hold the sector, destroy the station, and then come back to base. And this all together would take about 5 to 6 hours, because the first part of the fight where they take the station generally would be empty. When they destroy the station, there would be a slight push to try and take it, and then when they get back to base would be the whole defense of your base sector when the enemy tries to camp you in. And this would take several hours because the enemy would just do it for 2 hours, and that's like an hour after the station was destroyed. So everything would come up to about a 6 hour operation. Genesis didn't allow Genesis did allow the members to leave when they needed to. However, after a while, they noticed that they'd lose massive numbers of the force immediately after the operation. So they started to get pushy on it and say, if you leave now, we won't replace your doctrine ship. Now, this is what aggravated players even further. Now, although the fact is that they are very pushy, you obviously know who I'm referring to. I'm not going to refer to him by name. He knows who he is. Obviously, everybody knows who he is. But he's very pushy, he's very cocky, and those things really, really push the whole aspect. And at this point, everybody started to get more aggravated. And when you jumped into operations, the expectation from the commanders was over the top. You had to fly at their speeds, and their speeds weren't just regular speeds. Their speeds were max command on a cruiser with max defense, max firepower, high-end resolution on their guns because they have full research on their guns. And this was making people go crazy because you jump into an op to help them fight, and now all of a sudden your ship, which can only do 1,200, has to keep up with the ship that can do 1,500 or even 1,800. I'm not even sure about how fast they were moving because I could only move at 1.5 and I was falling out of their bubbles. Then further to implement worse situations was the fact on their weapon ranges. They would make you sit at 60 kilometers and they would start screaming at the fact that players weren't doing damage. Now, yes, this is such a difficult thing to do as it is with any fleet. Now, other than that, they started complaining about not hitting the right commands, not hitting the right enemies, and all of this just kept bubbling over till it became toxic. And this is where a lot of players stopped showing up for CTAs. And this is how come their operation fleet started to get smaller. Now, yes, in no way are they harmless. If you jumped into a Genesis area and you tried to take them, you'd most probably experience a full force counter attack. That's a solid 300 to 400 players countering you immediately. And if you stay there for too long, you should expect at least 800 players to counter you because they will defend their own territories. And this has happened several times. They have had pushes from DP when they tried to come in. Now, with all the resources that DP had, they upgraded their main fleet. They put them in faction cruisers and in faction battleships. Now, with faction cruisers and faction battleships, they had a massive advantage. When they jumped into combat, they did massive damage to the fleets that they were up against. And they obviously exploited the whole single doctrine effect that Genesis was running by running ships that could counter their doctrines. Now, Genesis is still following the same one fleet operation tactic, and they don't understand the negatives involved in their one fleet tactic. With the one fleet tactic, as I said, you are a one trick pony. All you've got to do is beat the trick and you have won. So with all of this, that is where Genesis started to fail severely in ending the war. They can still keep up their defenses, they can still make a quick push, but they don't have the numbers to sustain a long-term fight. So that is everything that you need to know about the Genesis side of the main problems. The DP side of the main problems, they have about 20 to 50 active players, right? So those are the active players who will jump around and cause havoc within the Genesis area. They'll run fleet operations through the Genesis areas, and they will generally run infection cruisers, making them very difficult to hit. Now, when a fleet groups up to try and take them on, they simply hide in a sector, log off, and make them waste hours waiting for them to come back online. Obviously, it is a stall tactic. It's what they are using to keep their ships off the grid. Now, obviously, they haven't been caught and they haven't been destroyed enough, but that is the way that they were operating, playing the quick gank, basically. So they'll come in, they'll hit a quick fleet in the middle of a dead space, jump out, take over all of the loot that they could get, and that is how they were making their money. There is one of the gangs from DP who are led by Speedy, so the Speedy gang. Then there were several other gangs who ran large amounts of bots. They have been suffering major losses, and I believe they have disappeared from the region. I haven't seen them in the region when I was with Genesis last 2 days ago. So yes, that is the whole thing that happened. Now, I did leave Genesis Corporation, and I didn't leave it because I didn't like the corp. I actually left Genesis to join Pandemic, and Pandemic has one of the largest communities of content creators. So it might be an opportunity for me in terms of having collaborations with other YouTubers, and you can look for it on my channel. They will pop up from time to time. There is the Method Gaming crew. I believe there's several YouTubers. I'll start getting their names and tag them out on one of the future videos. So let's go on with the next thing in this entire operation. So this whole fight has been dragging on, and recently what has happened is a lot of players, a lot of corps have decided to up their doctrines. Now, upping your doctrine, you can't just up your doctrine slightly. You have to up your doctrine adequately so that you have enough firepower for the next level of fighting. And honestly, DP has definitely upped their level of fighting. They started to play Navy issue vessels, and that was definitely making a big impact. It took 6 of them to hold the gate against 50 players. So yes, it definitely shows the difference between spending little and spending a lot. It makes a major difference in the entire fight. Now, Genesis is under the impression that they can keep up the cheap fight method moving forward, and they intend to move up in the doctrine without going to the extremes. In other words, they're going to go up from cruisers as doctrine into battle cruisers as doctrine, and the battle cruisers in the doctrine are going to be the cheaper range of battle cruisers. So obviously, they're not capitalizing on the fact that they could go the assault class battle cruiser. They're not going along the route of taking a T8 battle cruiser as the doctrine. And I do understand it to some extent. You don't want players to be running an expensive ship when they don't have the skills. But with that expensive ship, you buy time. You make your operations shorter. You can launch 1 hour before the fight, and you can still take the fight. Now, they haven't thought of those parts to the operation, and that has severely it has severely hurt the operation of Genesis, right? So there is one thing that Genesis hasn't seen. Obviously, there is a certain person, a certain commander who is at the forefront of that idea. We all know him. As I said, he's one of the biggest YouTubers around, and I'm not going to give his name. But obviously, I just said that he's a YouTuber, so I most probably spoiled who he is. So his idea of a doctrine is to keep things as cheap as possible. Now, here's the whole idea behind a doctrine in reality. The whole idea behind a doctrine is to have a ship that is easily replaced. It can be cheap if you don't have the resources. So obviously, if you're playing the wrong way as a team, you aren't going to have the resources. Like, for example, dedicating 100% of your force to the war, when you can say, right, you know what, during the war period, we're going to have a 25% tax rate, and you guys who aren't going to take part in the war, please go out and rat your encounters in high sec, or rat out as many anomalies as you can in this time so that we can fund up our next level of battle cruisers. And that would be fantastic, because you're not only going to benefit one group, everybody can benefit from it. And you don't have to make one ship your doctrine. You can make 5 ship doctrines. You can make 4 ship doctrines. You can make 20 ship doctrines. All you have to do is invest the resources, build at least 5 per player in your corporation. Obviously, with 5,000 players, that's 25,000 ships. Build 5 for each player. hold it all up inside your lockers, transfer it between the corps, and all you've got at the end of the day is this massive fleet of ships that is always there if you need it in case of a war. If somebody else tries to take you on, you don't need 1,000 players to break a beach head of 200 players. You can simply go in with your 200 players and smash through their 200 because you have firepower. You could go in with a small attack force and break their weaker doctrine fleets. And that is the whole idea behind running these. It's to run the most efficient and the cheapest within efficient build. Obviously, you could always go with the cheap build and run with massive numbers all the time, but it's going to cost you more in the long run. And that is where Genesis has severely fallen behind. They have taken on the cheap ships with the long-term cost loss. So yes, DP are losing the war because they have taken a massive knocking and they have lost most of their territory. However, Genesis has lost a lot of the war in terms of progression because they are way behind. I would say they are about a month and a half behind everybody else in terms of development. With a quick surge of players heading towards the next tier of ships, they could actually get back into the game. However, with changing doctrines and making it just a single ship, it's not a very good idea because players are going to get frustrated and agitated. And the moment you have agitated players in your fleets, they're not going to want to participate. And if you can allow a player to use their weapon type, if you can allow your fleets to be diverse, you just have to set 3 goals for your fleet. You approach at a certain level. As your fleets get closer, you now have an advantage with full fire, instead of having your advantage only at one rate and making sure that they don't close in too far. That is the whole point. That is what they need from Genesis. However, Genesis is slightly behind. If I had to estimate where Genesis is right now, I'd say that Genesis is at the end of T7. That is their progression level. They're at the end of T7. They haven't even reached the midpoint of T8 where they should be right now. They need to start progressing through that level, and they need to end this war as soon as possible and not engage in another war for at least a month. They need to get ready for sovereignty, and sovereignty, when it drops, is going to ruin everything for them. If they don't have the firepower to defend those heavy stations, they're going to lose billions. And you may think a large force is going to help you. A large force isn't going to help you. If you keep up this fighting and DP decides to take you on with a full faction cruiser fleet, y'all don't stand a chance. 200 of them can take out 800 of you. And that is the fact behind how big these fleets can be. So thank you all for watching. Have a good day.